Good morning, Gunners fans. Happy Monday to you all. This is the blog on you Gunners post-match reaction. Today we're going to be looking at Leeds versus Arsenal, a 0-0 draw, a point. Did we deserve it? We probably didn't, but it's a point nonetheless. There's plenty to get our teeth into here, so let's have a look. I think most of us were probably pleased when we saw the team line up for this one. We've been calling for Aubameyang to go central. A lot of people have been calling for Aubameyang to go central for some time. And Mikel saw to that with his selection, putting Pepe on one side and Willian on the other. The Brazilian is not a popular man amongst Gunners at the moment, so his inclusion was underwhelming. And let's be honest, he did nothing during that first half that disproved any of that cynicism. But at the start, it looked a bit different. We saw Joe Willock included in the lineup as well. An inclusion that his performances had merited, had warranted. He's been very good at breaking into spaces and carrying the ball. I think we all hoped that he would do that against Leeds. So from the outset, plenty of positivity, plenty of optimism, looking to bounce back from the Villa defeat. But in truth, after a fairly decent 15 to 20 minutes in which Leeds were pretty standoffish, pretty circumspect, we didn't have too much to show for it. Willian and Pepe, when they did get the ball, had their backs to goal, which rendered them half as effective as they could be. And the best moments we did have in that first half were when they were able to turn on the ball and do something with it. Credit to Leeds, I think they were smart in stopping that, keeping tight to their men and keeping their backs to goal. And as we've seen, that's the way to keep Pepe quiet. That said, he did have a couple of half-decent shots. I think his favoured left foot is one you want to keep him off of, but Leeds, on a couple of occasions, allowed him inside. He got a shot off, not too bad. There was a ball over the top for Willian, a smart piece of movement. He was beaten to it by the keeper on that occasion, but there were bits and pieces of promise in those 20 minutes. But the match momentum shifted pretty rapidly halfway through that first half, and there wasn't too much more to be happy about. Leeds took control of the midfield. They pushed up on Dani Ceballos and Granit Xhaka. Together again, primarily I would have said owing to the unavailability of El Neni and Partey. And the two of them, if we're honest, were dominated in the second half of that first half. They weren't able to turn, they weren't able to progress the ball, and we slipped back into the same mode that we've been stuck in for weeks. We can't build up. We can't get the ball forward. We can't do the sort of things with it that we'd all like to see the team do. And we were, once again, bogged down. We were rank. It was lacking in all respects, in all departments from a creative point of view. We resorted, again, in those circumstances, to bridging the gap between defence and attack by simply punting it longer, and those balls were not sticking to the feet of Willian, Aubameyang or Pepe. They were bouncing straight off and coming straight back to the Leeds midfield, who had no problem picking those up, turning around and breaking on us, and they did that. There were several moments, particularly down Hector Bellerin side, in that first half where Leeds found some real joy, and because of Pepe's lax attitude to tracking back for certain parts of that first half, they had a lot of joy, they had a lot of success. They had some good chances to score. We had some half chances at best. Fortunately, we went in at the break at 0-0, and it was a chance, I think, for the manager to have a look at it, because it was not good second half of that half. There wasn't much to build on. You could hear him shouting on the sidelines, quicker, and while that worked for 30-second periods, there was no sustained urgency or desire to build momentum to the point that it was so predictable and so slow that Leeds were picking us off at will and creating chances and looking genuinely dangerous, much more dangerous than we should ever have allowed them to be. And it was poor. We haven't moved on. Those 2 weeks off haven't changed this team. The formation was the same. The personnel were a bit different, but those tinkerings made no difference at all. If anything, we were a little bit stuffier without the quality of Partey in the centre of midfield than we have been. It wasn't good. Second half, I think we were all pleased when we heard that Willian was going to make way for Reece Nelson, another one who has been knocking on the door, been pushing for first team minutes. Justifiably so. He's lively, he's bright, he's quick, he's direct. Something Willian has not necessarily been since he arrived. We thought he would be. We thought he'd add a little something in the final third. He hasn't. And it seemed like a fair shout to put Reece on. I think many of us assumed it was tactical. In the event, it seems it wasn't. It seems Willian, fresh from 2 weeks off, doing not a great deal except for flying overseas, was feeling a muscular issue. And this was a good chance for Reece to come on and make an impact. Unfortunately for him and for the rest of us, we never really got to see him make an impact. We never really see any differences in the second half, any change in tempo, any change in style or attitude, because of the now infamous incident in which Nicola Pepe decided to push his head into the face of a Leeds defender. It is perhaps testament to the frustration he'd been feeling, in which he'd been quick to voice to the press, that he was so easily riled and so easily goaded into what was an absolute gimme for the Leeds defender. I mean, the guy goes down like someone's dropped the nut on him from 30 yards. It was as tame a head push as you'll see, a football headbutt. I saw it called online and that's exactly what it was. But regardless of whether it was a glancing blow or a full-on headbutt, you can't do it. And he had to go. Nobody's got any complaints. The boss was quick to say what he felt about it after the match, and I don't think Pepe can have any arguments. He's been pushing for more minutes. He was given the chance, and he, as others have said, he threw himself under the bus, and his team along with him. We never got to see what we might have made of the second half with 11 instead. And interestingly, we reverted to the sort of counter-attacking football which we saw Mikel introduce shortly after he arrived at the club, and to be honest, it was probably better in many respects than what we saw for the majority of the first half. I think as far as we could be, we were solid. We were dealing with the balls into the box. We were cutting off the space for them to work into. They couldn't break on us anymore. And to that end, Leeds were much less effective. They weren't getting overloads down our wings. We were compact and disciplined, and we were able to break on 3, maybe 4 occasions with real menace. There were a couple of absolutely amazing balls through to Saka and Aubameyang. Unfortunately, on this occasion, particularly Saka, who didn't start the game, by the way, was unable to convert. Some would say it would have been unjustified. If they were able to do so, it would have been a real smash and grab. But I think that's the strength of that counter-attacking system, is that we can absorb a lot, and we seem to be pretty good at doing that now. And we can break and score. But we've got to be efficient in that system to be able to make it work. And unfortunately, Aubameyang with a turn and shot, pretty tame. And Saka, who perhaps took one touch too many, or in fairness to him, perhaps the keeper did a really good job of scrambling and denying him from 10 or 12 yards out when he'd been sent through, meant that we couldn't make the most of those fleeting chances that we had, and the match petered out into a 0-0. I think it's also fair and important that we acknowledge that our new signing, Mr. Woodwork, did a fantastic job in denying Leeds on the day 3 occasions in which we were saved by the width of a post or a crossbar. But we'll take it. We'll take that sort of luck that we haven't had on other occasions, and reward for a real slog in that second half. I don't know if we'd have been any better with 11 on the pitch. It's difficult to say we wouldn't have been any better, but it's interesting that a switch of systems back to something we were more used to in the early days of Arteta was more effective in that second half. And I wonder if Mikel would have learned more from that change than he did from anything else that the players did on the day. Given that our number one source of chances of late, and again in the first half in particular against Leeds, was from forcing turnovers from defenders or deep-lying midfielders caught in possession, I wonder if Mikel will use what he saw in the second half to revert to a more counter-attacking system. We seem at the moment, with the personnel we have, to do better when we're on the back foot, as it were, when we can control the play in front of us and then move quickly up the field, whether that's through David Luiz playing long and Aubameyang running on, or whether it's through one or two balls through the midfield. It's a system that served us well last season, got us to the FA Cup final, and it may be worth, until we can sort the personnel issues in midfield, getting some new faces in, more creative faces, it may just be worth going back there, because what we're doing at the moment, despite formation changes, personnel changes, hasn't worked and isn't working and doesn't look like working anytime soon. I thought Joe Willock may have added something a bit different, but after the first 15 or 20 minutes, he really struggled to get into the game from an offensive and defensive point of view. He won a few balls here and there, but he was running into dead ends instead of running into the sort of spaces where he could be found. But again, that speaks to a creativity issue. If we don't have someone who can find him, and he's got nobody to pass to if he does get into those positions, what good is it? I think it's time for going back to the drawing board, going back to the future. I called it in the blog, and looking again at whether, until we get the one or two players we need in midfield, we should fall back a bit. A final word for a couple of players I thought really stood out for us. Bernd Leno, obviously, when called upon, did as much as you could expect or ask a goalkeeper to do. Is a great shot stopper, continues to be a great shot stopper, and denied Leeds on 2 or 3 occasions with some smart saves. The woodwork did the rest, but it was a good performance from Bernd. Interesting that he was kicking long, not a tactic I thought worked particularly well, but clearly a game plan from the manager. I think we're better playing out from the back. At least it gives us a chance to build something. I know we're not particularly creative at the moment or progressive, but when we're kicking long, we have to hope that someone can win the header and pick up the second balls, and we just weren't doing that. So I wonder whether Leno will go back to playing out from the back again. That aside, good performance from him. Shout out also should go to Bukayo Saka. Unfortunately, he went off with a knock. I hope it's not too serious, but he was lively and quick and working well in that counter-attacking system, able to stretch the play, able to run in at his man, create some space, play some balls and get into good positions. There's not much I can tell you that you don't already know about Saka. He's a great player. Played too many games over the international break, unfortunately. Hopefully he can be given the Europa League fixture off and can be ready to go again in place of Willian for Wolves next Sunday. I see no reason why the Brazilian keeps his place. He continues to underwhelm. It's time he spent some time on the bench, riding the pine. And a final quick word for Dani Ceballos. He was scrappy and pugnacious in midfield. There were several occasions when he looked to have lost it but won it back. In that respect, he was very good, recovering the ball, making tackles, adding some bite. That comes at the expense, as we know, of creativity, but if he's in there snapping around doing his job, we can't ask too much more from him at this stage. So that's that for this week, Gunners. The point in the end looked decent, given the circumstances. We all looked for more after the Villa performance. We didn't get it, and a lot of thinking needs to be done between now and next Sunday in that wretched evening slot when we welcome Wolves to the Emirates. We've got to be sharper, we've got to be better. At the moment, I don't see where that is coming from. Hopefully Partey will be back, but it's clear there are pretty serious problems at the top end of the pitch and in the midfield, and Arteta's going to have to get his heads together with his coaching team in midweek to really think about what needs to be done and what we can do to make a change. But for now, thanks very much for listening. Leave us a comment as ever. Give us a like, give us a follow if nothing else. We're happy to take your questions, and we look forward to the build-up to the Molde game in midweek. Take care.